Florida State just lost another recruit, and that's not likely the end of the bad news.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst and college football writer, here to bring you all the news on Locked On Seminoles. Thank you for making this your first listen each and every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $100, $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Today's show is going to end with discussing how Florida State can kind of get out of that hole that they've seemingly found themselves in recruiting, what's next with it. But first, this is the big thing that I want to lead off with. Izayia Williams, class of 2026, one of the best players in the class of 2026 and a Noles commitment. Well, he is no longer committed to Florida State. And quite frankly, it doesn't surprise me. Here's a little bit of information about Izayia and what he could have been bringing to the Florida State Seminoles. First off, this is a very, not just sort of, this is a very mobile kid in terms of positions. Could be an H-back, could be a receiver, could be a tight end, could be a pure defensive end, could be an outside linebacker. You could probably play him at inside linebacker as well. He's just over 205 pounds. He's somewhere in that range, can really run, and he's a natural pass rusher. That's what Tavares, where he plays just north of Orlando, has done. Here are some of the rankings for this young man by the four major services. On3 has him the highest as a pure linebacker, number 2 nationally, 40th overall, 4-star, 24/7 also has him as a 4-star, the number 9 linebacker, 122nd nationally. ESPN 4-star, the 5th linebacker in the country, number 38 nationally, which is the highest ranking for him. And Rivals has him as the 16th linebacker and number 235 nationally. So if you have that many different people that like him, you get the idea that he's obviously a pretty good football player. I've met him, great kid. And here are a couple other bonus points about his recruitment and why it was advantageous for the Noles. Being from where he's from, it's always good to get kids from the Orlando area. And he grew up liking Florida, and he's closer to the Gators, and he still picked Florida State over them. So losing him sucks. And here's the extra extension of that. There is a possibility that he ends up in Miami. He's been down there recently. Do not be surprised if he ends up with the Hurricanes. So it's just lose, lose, lose here because you had such a good thing. And this season's probably caused that to kind of go away. As for what I think he's going to be long-term, it's still kind of up in the air. Probably an outside linebacker, but he could grow into a pure defensive end. He could play offense, as I mentioned a moment ago. But physically, this is a young man with his length and his ability to get off the football with that first step first. Probably going to be either an outside linebacker, defensive end, or a combination of both. Can't go wrong with that because you can never have enough guys getting after the quarterback and causing havoc in the opponent's backfield. Next, we're going to talk a little bit again about what's next for Florida State in recruiting. Like, is this a trend? And to finish up, how can Florida State get out of the hole? That is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. Can Florida State stop what appears to be a trend? Well, it appears that it's probably going to be by the information that I've heard here recently. Overall, I've expected that for a while. I just didn't know the order, nor will anybody ever, because kids change their minds so often. But I expect some more decommitments from the 25 class. Could it happen Today, yes. Could it happen later? Possibly. CJ Wiley, for those of you who don't know, has flipped his commitment. He was committed to the Noles, now he decommitted and then just committed to Georgia. I believe Florida State is still going to recruit him and everybody else, but like they have 0 commitments at receiver. That was the latest trend. They had three at the end of September. Then that all just started going down the hill with Clark decommitting, the kid from South Carolina that's a really fast player. And then it's just continued. They lose 2 more really good receivers. And now you're just starting to see this trend. I don't know if you can really get out of it without winning football games. I'm not here to process something that isn't true. I'm going to give you the straight answer every time. Florida State is in a lot of recruiting trouble. I have heard, and I'm sure many of you have as well, that staff changes are coming, probably massive staff changes after this season. That can be positive, that can be negative, but long term, I am very steadfast that it will be positive because you're just going to go into another buzzsaw next year with this staff. They have to make changes. So even if you lose short term, that's okay long term. As I detailed in another podcast that's in the recruiting tab on the YouTube page, by the way, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on with these coaches. There are going to be some changes, but every one of them that they hire moving forward, they need to have recruiting as one of the preset conditions, quite frankly, that they can't just be a mediocre recruiter. They got to accept that it's a part of the business, meaning even interfering in your personal life. Yes, flat out. 2, you got to like it, not just accept it. And finally, you got to go out and prove it. I want somebody that's got a track record if possible as well. But those are some of the things. You've got to be able to go out and do that. So recruiting is important. Finally, about this whole situation, the expectations for recruiting the rest of this year. Do the best you can for salvaging the players that are committed. That's number 1. There's no way around that. Kids are committed to you. You need to try to keep them committed. Sell them on what Florida State is, the history, why they should come to Florida State. This isn't rocket science. But more importantly, and I have no idea how you do this because you're such a bad football team, you have to add several more players to this recruiting class. Does anybody really think that's going to happen? I don't. And here's the second part of that. You have to add some elite players. I just don't see it. Prove me wrong is something I say quite often on this show. And today is really not something that I'm going to look at and say it's different. I'm not happy with what's going on right now with Florida State. I'm sure that many of you feel the same way. But I mean, you have to look at it from a recruit's perspective, a parent's perspective. You have to take the garnet and gold off. Why would you go to Florida State right now? They've won 1 football game. The coaching staff is on the hot seat. Everybody in some way, shape, or form, because the head coach may or may not be in Tallahassee, probably not after this year, but after next year, Lord only knows. That would be, if they have a bad year next year, I think it's pretty safe that Norvell is going to be gone. How do you sell Florida State directly? I mean, I talked about, the tradition and this and that, but development, getting the NFL right now is not exactly an easy thing to do, even though they had 13 guys, I believe it was, off the top of my head, that was either at the combine or got drafted, made a team, whatever. I mean, they were really good this past spring, but it seems to be more of an aberration. And again, I know flat out teams are recruiting against Florida State right now, and it's not real hard. So with that being in mind, note that Norvell's task is going to be really hard. His staff's task is going to be even more difficult in some of these one-on-one situations about, hey, are you going to be there? We know Norvell probably going to get fired because of his contract. Who's going to be on the staff? They can't really answer those questions, at least not honestly, because nobody knows 100% on every decision with the staff. Maybe 1 or 2 that know that they're going to leave. Beyond that, you really have a tough time because you're in the in-between. And kids, and especially parents, moms, they want to know who the guys are that are going to be on the staff coaching. They want to know who the back office staff is, the recruiting assistants, the people that are the academic advice. All that is set based on who the head coach, the coordinators and stuff are, because it trickles down from there. There's going to be coordinators and different position coaches gone. So some of these other people will probably leave too, and or maybe they get replaced. Who knows? It is that difficult. It's going to be difficult. I'm going to have another podcast, a live show tomorrow night after the Florida State Notre Dame game at 11 p.m. Make sure you check that out. I'm going to talk more recruiting. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. We're going to talk more about this. And I got a bunch of recruiting stuff, a lot of coaching information. This is all intertwined. So make sure you check it out. But you can follow me at FBScout_Florida, and you can follow this specific podcast at _Seminoles on X. I truly appreciate it. Make sure you check out Locked On ACC next, and I will talk to everybody tomorrow. Thank you very much. I truly do appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles today.